Do you feel that in a time when we are more connected than ever, we are drifting away from real human connection, especially to ourselves? I do. Hi, I'm Leticia Latino, and I want to invite you to join me and my very inspiring guests in exploring ways to reconnect to your essence, to your definite purpose, to what makes you tick. Are you ready? Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Back to Basics, Reconnecting to the Essence of You. I'm with Josh Wilson today. He started in public service as a paramedic and eventually transitioned from emergency medicine to entrepreneurship, content creation, and investment banking. He's a registered investment banking representative and a real estate broker, as well as the host of the Investor Podcast, where he brings together top investors, entrepreneurs, and financial experts to share their knowledge on wealth building, market trends, and strategic investment. Hello, Josh, and welcome to Back to Basics.
Hello. It is so good to connect with you again. I think Jennifer Hill introduced us about
That's true.
4 years ago, and I'm so glad she did. And you are just doing so well in podcasting. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, that's a compliment coming from you because you have interviewed over 2,000 people. You're the pro at content creation. So I look up for you. Yes, our dear friend Jennifer, she always has the best connections. I know when she said, would you consider this person? And I say yes already. And she has an amazing episode of Back to Basics. And, the journey here is what it's all about, how you stay connected to what makes you tick. And I was on your podcast, and you're a great interviewer. And one of the things I really like about people like you is when I see a big smile and good energy coming through the screen and through the voice, it's always something that makes me tick, which is the subject of my podcast. And so I said, well, I'm going to reach out to Josh. I know he's very busy, but I was so happy when you say, yes, I'm coming in.
Always have time for you. I appreciate you greatly.
Thank you, Josh. So obviously, a perfect guest for this podcast is somebody like you, which started in a very different direction than where your life, I feel, is now. And it's all the turns and corners and pivot moments that I'm fascinated about, because I know a lot of people that listen to us, they have something, a corner that maybe they haven't turned, or a dream they haven't really actively pursued. And my goal is, if we in this conversation get one person to maybe give it a try, even with a small step, then my heart is filled. So tell me about younger Josh and what you dreamt to be and what were you passionate about as a child?
Yeah. When I was young, the thing that I think most wanted to be like is be like my dad, right? So my dad was a man's man. My dad was in construction, and we grew up in South Florida, not too far from where you guys are. And I grew up on the construction site helping dad. And he was my hero. He was a Vietnam vet. He was a man's man. He had tattoos, and he, into his 40s, 50s, and 60s, he still had, six pack. And all my friends, all the guys looked up to him. So what did I want to be? I wanted to be in the family business. I wanted to help dad. So from early age, I always considered myself just going to be a part of the family business. It didn't turn out that way for many years. We could share that story if it's helpful later on, but I wanted to be like my father. Life and circumstance kicked my teeth in many times, and I had to pivot over the last 25 years of my professional career, or however long. And we could go through the different pivots there. But so starting out, I wanted to be like my dad. I wanted to go into the military. I was in ROTC. I wanted to be special force, and I wanted to go that direction. Never actually made it there, but that's where I wanted to go as a young guy. I wanted to be Rambo like my dad.
Well, I'm sure that there's many aspects of who your dad is that you still are. So it's funny that you mentioned that, because I am in the family business, and I always said I'm never going to be in the family business. And I went to work for Merrill Lynch and Nortel, and I went like, no, being the rebellion, I think it's natural to always avoid it, but there's a lot of satisfaction when as you age, maybe you never come into, I definitely want to hear the story about whatever you want to share. But it was, if there was a hesitation or what is it? But being in the family business is a huge compromise. And sometimes I respect people that say it's not for me
Yeah.
because it's really, it feels heavy. I say it often, like it feels heavy, but at the same time, when I look at the legacy that I'm helping push, that the benefits outweigh the heaviness. So I'm happy overall, but it's not for everybody.
Not for everyone, for sure. You got it.
Yes. So when you went into the public service, so obviously you had a calling because not everybody goes to public service so early on and being a paramedic and I'm sure you were put into a lot of stressful situations. I have great respect for people in emergency, medical emergency. What can you share about that part of the journey? Did you feel back then that you were doing something that fulfilled you?
Yeah, so before that, my growing up in construction, I got into real estate. My thought was dad builds it, I sell it. So I became a real estate agent, a real estate broker. And I started before I knew what an investor was. Because I mean, we
Mm,
never had extra money. We always worked, job to job, paycheck to paycheck. So I didn't understand that there were people out there whose job it was to be an investor.
mm,
So I
mm,
started meeting them because I would always have multiple jobs trying to make extra money for myself and for the family because we just didn't have a lot. I met investors, brought them into the family business, and that's when the family business started to grow. But that's also when I got booted out. I probably deserved it greatly. So I went out on my own, did a bunch of real estate with other investors in the speculative market, building stuff. And this was in 2006. I built $8 million worth of spec homes. I'm a young guy, so I'm out there cranking, and then the market crashed on me. That's the first
mm,
time I had kind of my midlife crisis, right? I went out there to prove it to the world I could do this. I outworked people. I slept under my desk at the office. And now, I just built millions of dollars worth of stuff. And now I have no money and I have no job and there's no jobs in the market. So I really struggled. I had my first midlife crisis and I go, God, what am I supposed to do? Who am I? I got that tattooed on my arm. It says, who am I? I
mm,
really go, I had a loss of identity. It was all built around what I did for a living. People would meet you. Oh, hey, Josh, what do you do? Right. So,
mhm,
anyways,
mhm,
um, so I sold all my stuff and I was going to go on a mission trip. I was like, screw capitalism, screw this, world. I'm going on a mission trip. Like I believe in God and I believe that people out there who really do want help. My neighbor, who is wiser than me, he was a fire chief. He said, if you're going to go to fill in the blank wherever, you better learn some medical stuff, how to patch a bullet hole, because you might get shot. I was like, oh, that's cool. So I went to EMT school to really learn a medical side so I could bring that to the mission fields, do medical missions. I fell in love with EMT school. I did EMT, which is emergency medical technician. Then I went to fire college, and then I went to paramedic school. And then I wound up teaching paramedic school and defensive tactics. And I got involved in the fire service. I was a Ocala Fire Rescue. I did that for a good amount of time in my life. And great experiences delivering babies, patching bullet
mm.
holes,
Oh
um,
my.
saving lives, running in fires. It was very, very, very exciting.
Wow, that is incredible. So I love where this is going because it's like you baking. I was gonna ask, so where did the real estate happen and all this? But so it's interesting because it was all already happening. So I always call it collecting the pieces of the puzzle. Like I feel in life, we go on and every failure or every adventure we go, we might fail, but we ended up collecting like a video game. Like you have a tool in your toolbox that
Yeah,
maybe you're not going to use for a while, but when the right time comes, you're going to have it and it's going to make the game changer. So I guess you went collecting a lot of this
yeah.
and into saving lives. Any special story? I mean, bringing babies to the world, that's definitely a highlight. And any other experiences that was a highlight from that time?
Yeah. So with that training, kind of like fast forward, I have 3 kids now. I My wife said I didn't deliver. I just caught the baby, but I delivered 2 out of the 3 of my babies,
Oh
which
my
was
God,
a
that's awesome.
great experience, right? I've done that for other people, but doing that for your own kid, it was so special being in that moment. But I've saved every one of my kids' lives from either choking or fill in the blank. I've done so for my wife. I just that skill set has paid dividends over and over and over for people, in my life. There's just been some really exciting, and sometimes exciting is not the right word to use because it's scary or it might be tragic. But there's so many times where I got to step up and really help someone out of a very, very bad situation. And that brought me a lot of joy and a lot of, what's that word? Like self worth. Like I found my worth in
Mm,
helping and rescuing others. That's
I love that.
sometimes dangerous for a young man because you could build your identity in making money, which I did in the past, or rescuing people, and then you turn into this Superman complex where you're just out to save the world or save people, and then if it doesn't happen, you can really have another identity crisis. So, man, I really spend a lot of time just getting beat up with who I am, what makes me tick, and what am I supposed to do in this life. And that was
Mm,
another, you call it puzzle piece. I love that. That was another puzzle piece that kind of built onto the story of who is Josh.
mm-hmm. I love that. That's why I knew you were going to be a great guest because it's just like I like these kind of conversations, and these thoughts are the ones that inspire me to like. I wish somebody would have heard my conversation with Josh, like if we were having this conversation over coffee, and that's why I wanted the podcast to exist because that spending time on who we are, I think we don't do that enough.
I agree.
And I think we definitely um, don't spend enough time on identity. Like when I launched my webpage, which, I don't monetize it particularly or anything, but I did it because people related me. Like my identity was so linked with the business. Like you're the tower, you're into towers, tower businesses. I'm like, but I'm so much more than that. Like there's a lot. And every time, even when I did my podcast, people thought our company was doing bad because now I'm podcasting. Oh, she's podcasting. Business might not be good. And that need to people for labeling you into what you're doing, I've always struggled with it. And so we share that too, because I want to hear how you started the whole podcasting idea, because this is something that I find fascinating. I don't know if you find yourself giving advice to others on how to start, like, how do you start a podcast? People still sometimes ask me about that.
Yeah. Yeah, it happens every day of my life. You do something a lot, people start to notice, and then they ask you how to do it. So yeah, we've built over the years. I've built 20 of them. I've sold two of them. I've interviewed
Wow.
2,000 people or so. Had some shows hit iTunes top of charts. So like, we've been in the podcast game for a little bit, and it's been such a great joy in terms of what you like to ask the question like, what makes you tick? Like, I really feel a connection with people when you're asking them about their story and their background, and when you're lifting them up in front of your network or community, and you get asked, when you're hosting the podcast show, which you are here, you're in control and you can kind of guide the conversation and ask questions that you might not be able to just ask them over coffee. You could go deep. You can really do that. So I do find, like you, find a lot of joy in that human connection. I need that as a founder who works from home. Like sometimes you get lonely. So having this ability to connect deeply with other people on a like business level, but also maybe a spiritual level, like it's very fulfilling.
Mm, I totally agree with you. It's and then I don't know if you would agree. Well, you have an investors podcast, but like mine has nothing to do with telecom, and that's what confuses the people the most. And
Yeah.
I specifically don't invite people from my industry because I don't want even to think that there's a secret agenda. Like people in my industry that have been on my podcast is the inventor of the cell phone. So it's like you cannot argue with wanting to have him on the podcast. So things like that, things that people don't think, oh, I'm getting invited because she wants something out of me. So I purposely don't connect the dots. But it's funny how the dots get connected anyway, because I've had guests that tell me, oh, my sister is in telecom, you should meet her. And something like from an authentic place yields business results without pursuing it. So it's almost the Seth Godin. I'm sure you're familiar with Seth
I
Godin, who
am.
was my episode 100, by the way.
Nice.
But it's almost like the reverse approach to sales. It's like you're not pursuing the sale, but the sale will get to you if you pursue it authentically.
Yeah.
Do you agree with any of that?
I do. Sometimes, so it takes time, and sometimes when you don't have time, or you have a budget to make, or you know
Mhm.
you need to go out sales, you might approach the relationship wrong. And I make this mistake time to time. Is transactional versus relational. And Seth, interesting thing about Seth Godin is I've been in communications with him for maybe 10 years, and he responds to all his emails.
Yeah,
He's very responsive and he's very encouraging. You might only get a one sentence response, but like I just found like for as busy as he is, he's been on TV shows and he was on the show Billions. He's been on like I want to honor that guy. He really cares about the people in his audience. So if you don't know who Seth Godin is, read his book, Purple Cow, and all. I mean, smart guy, Icarus, Deception, good stuff.
absolutely. It's one of my absolute idols. And when I invent, because I started this podcast sidebar with the fellowship podcast program, which he created in Akimbo 5 years ago. And so basically, this exists because of a Seth Godin program. And so he said, name the 10 guests that you would like to have from easy to get to really hard to get, and then try. That's how you're gonna grow it. And he was like my number nine, my number 10 being Gloria Stefan, which I'm still working on. But
Yeah,
he was like one of my impossible right ways to get. And I would never ask. But then on my episode 100, I wanted somebody really, prominent. And I said, I'm just gonna ask him. And to my surprise, he answered to your point, and he said, I normally cannot give interviews to everybody, but something in the way you asked makes me want to say yes. And he said yes. And he was my 100th episode. But to your point, like sometimes the people we don't think that are going to say yes, the ones that are walking the talk really are the ones that are most available and that will have that kind of thing. Like he answers us or all his emails. He's crazy.
yeah. And you put in the work. You went through his program and you did 100 episodes. I think you guys are at like you're almost at 300 now. So
Yes, I need a 300 idea because it was going to be Glorious. I keep moving Gloria, but I cannot get a
it
hold of her.
needs to be Gloria, right? Guys, if anybody in the audience knows Gloria personally,
Yes.
we got to get her on number 300. She could be the.
Please, I have pictures with her. I met her, but get her on a podcast, that's harder. But I always say that I'm with you. I believe in God, and the time of God is perfect. And episode 300 will be who needs to be. So I'm on there, but thank you for noticing. Yeah, I have a big milestone episode. Maybe I'll delay this one and I'll make you 300. You're very close.
I do know
It
how
has
to
happened
dance,
before.
so I know Spanish dancing, so maybe I can
There,
listen to
there
some
you
Gloria
go.
stuff on
There
the
you
dance
go.
floor.
So to your point, I want to switch gears because you have something on your LinkedIn title that says LinkedIn Encourager.
Hmm.
And I want to ask you about that because it's such a, I mean, I think I get it, but I think it's going to be a lot of wisdom that you're going to share with us by sharing what you mean.
Yeah, yeah, I had to take a deep breath there because there's so many times in my life and my career. If you look at the messages that I get, I've been on LinkedIn for 10 or 15 years, or I don't even know, a long time. I almost got fired once for using LinkedIn, which
Oh
is
boy.
another story. But some people who I've been connected for a really long time. The other day, I was scrolling through the messages, and I saw, because I've had a lot of career changes and path changes and midlife crises, trying to answer the question, "Who am I?" And that was a really big challenge. And if I looked at the message, the most common message I get was "Congrats on the new job." Congrats on the new job. Congrats on, and I just remember, like, you know the person, there's a person behind the profile. Like we look at all these people. I've got 25,000 followers on LinkedIn. There's no way that my little brain can remember everybody and everybody's name in every single conversation. I do my best to love people well, but what I'm learning is that I could take a minute to encourage people, whether it's a LinkedIn post or a "congrats on the new job, happy birthday," and I do my best to try to lift up the community. But what I what I was thinking about just the other day is I was struggling deeply in my own life 2 days ago. So I texted a friend who I met on LinkedIn, and I said, "Hey man," he's this really, really, truly successful guy. He said, "Hey man, I'm really struggling. Could you pray for me?" I texted him, right? the beautiful thing about LinkedIn is making friends on LinkedIn. Yeah, that's cool. But when you take that friendship outside of LinkedIn through a phone call or you go to coffee or whatever the case may be, that's like the beautiful thing is evolving the friendship. But I text him and then the next morning he goes, absolutely, let's talk at 10:30, whatever. So we talked together. He walked me through and he goes, man, you don't know how many times I've been in your situation, Josh, struggling in this situation or that. And it was just really encouraging to hear a guy that I looked up to who's massively successful just giving me a little bit of an encouragement. He's like, listen, man, I'm going to put you on my prayer intent list and I'm going to pray for you. And I was so encouraged by that. So like that night, I was sitting in my bed, getting ready to go to bed, plugged in my phone. And, I put on do not disturb, but before I like put the phone down, I was like, you know what that guy did for me, I want to do for others. So I said, what am I like LinkedIn? I'm not a LinkedIn influencer. I don't want to be an influencer. Like, I don't care about that, right? Like I'm not looking to gain more. It'd be cool to gain more followers because then I could help more people. But like, what do I actually want to do is I want to lift up the people. That's why I do podcasting. I want to lift people up. So I was like, I'm going to be a LinkedIn encourager. I don't know if that title exists, but so I just put that out there. I'm surprised. Like, I'm impressed that you saw that. So yeah, I'm a
Mhm.
LinkedIn encourager. I leverage what God's given me in terms of my network here to encourage people and to point people to light.
I love that. Well, it resonated with me, and so I noticed, and I think we need more of that, lifting people up. And when you say I don't want followers, but I do, I can see how the struggle is because you come from an authentic place in what you do. I feel, and so you like I struggle with that. Like I don't want them, but I do want them. But because you want to help more people. When I get the text, and I'm sure I'm gonna get a few with this interview and say thank you. That's exactly what I needed to hear today.
Yeah.
Like with people that sometimes the people closer don't pay attention, but people that you don't even think this is gonna touch them, they are so grateful that I think that's encouragement in a way. So, and I think LinkedIn has built such a powerful community that if used properly, if used for good, if used not in a transactional way, but in a way to really connect,
Mhm.
that's we are a good example. Somebody we met, and then I think I met Jen through LinkedIn too, or something like that. And then it's like I feel a lot of these people are my friends, and some of them I never met them before personally, but I feel like I have my group, a community that's really lifting me up and helping me to your point of what you just shared. So thank you for that. If you had somebody that has never used LinkedIn, I get a lot of this, and this is not a pay commercial to LinkedIn, but this is the platform we met.
Yeah.
Um, or social media. Or so there's so many people that have a huge resistance, right? I run my own business. To me, has been a great way with very little investment, if anything, to send my message out there.
Yeah.
And it has been very successful. I feel I don't chase people anymore. Like people know what I'm doing just because of how I'm using the platform.
Yeah.
If you have a non-believer, what would be a few things that you would say if somebody to engage somehow?
Yeah. That's a really good question. So if they're a non-believer, I got to ask them why. What is your hesitation to it? And I've met people who are public figures who can't do it because of their job or their status, and I get that, right? I,
Mhm.
I understand like I had to, because of my job career and path that I've gone, I've had to get rid of certain social channels and I have to be very careful about what I share. Um, but for me, I would ask them, what's your resistance? Why aren't you on that? And let's just say they're allowed to, but they're just scared, or they go. I I've heard this before. I met super interesting people, and they said, "I just have nothing to say."
Mhm,
And
mhm.
and then I'd just ask them a question. I'd ask them like, "Hey, just let me know what's the last book you read?" And then they like became passionate and they started sharing the books that they read or how they built and sold this business or what are their investment strategies or they talk about their grandkids or they talk about like life lessons and I go, man, I just got so much value out of what you just said. Imagine if you just wrote that down and one day your grandkid gets to read that.
Mm, mm.
Like it's not for me, this not everybody does this. For me, LinkedIn is a journal. It's a diary. I get to share what's going on in my life personally. I share it with the world publicly because I made a promise to God as I learn, I will share. Sometimes it's really personal and it's scary and it's embarrassing, but I get to share, and then other people go, "Oh, me too," or "Man, that's helpful," or "Hey, Josh, here's how I can help." I've had all sorts of responses. So I
Mm,
I wouldn't try to convince them otherwise. I would just say that, man, they I think there's something in us, in every single one of us, that wants to share truth and share wisdom, and it's a place that you can do that. Now it's business related, so if you're trying to do other types of truth, or political or something, maybe Facebook or Twitter or Rumble or Telegram, or but there's just platforms for what you can do to share and lift people up with. It's a tool.
mm.
That's it.
Well, thank you for that. I think I totally agree with you. I think that there's a preconception and label like on how you show up in the world. But when you are authentic and you show up as who you are,
Mhm.
like I know brilliant engineers that are musicians are afraid of putting the music part of their life just because they think it's gonna lower the value or the perceived value of them as a career person.
Yeah.
And I think I'm actually, most people want to be a professional musician. Like I think, oh my, that's the one thing that they want to be around you because of that. So I think a lot of people struggle with that, like showing sides of them just because of how people may perceive that.
Yeah, I see that. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so you mentioned, I have to go there. I don't go here with many people, but you mentioned God a few times. So, and I would love to hear a little bit about what you want to share on your relationship with God, because I think if God, the universe, our definition of a higher power, is more present in our lives than we care to admit.
Yeah.
And the fact that sometimes we don't put it front and center, and I've seen this with people that put it front and center and acknowledge and praise and are grateful,
Yeah.
usually achieving a lot more or with more fluidity or with more flow that people that put a resistance or block that spiritual life separate from professional life. So I
Yeah.
just want to hear your take on that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Um, I got a funny story we could talk about later. Someone asked me that on their show, and I got an opportunity to talk about my belief system on an adult only show. It was we could talk
Oh,
about that. But back
that's
to the story
interesting.
about God. Um,
That was a good interview.
Yeah, it was very interesting. But the my belief in God is, if we go back to what makes us tick, and we talk about like this question of who I am, to kind of like tie all these pieces together. I have a tattooed on my arm. It says, "Who am I?" I got that tattoo because one day I was standing on a bridge thinking of killing myself. And I felt God say to me, "Who are you?" And here comes cuss word. I said, "I don't know who the fuck I am." Sorry for the language, but like that was in the most real, most painful moment of my life. I had all these changes in my life. I went through, many financial disasters. I couldn't figure out why God created me. And I felt worthless. I couldn't make the money. My business failed. I cashed out my pension to build a fitness technology that didn't work, right? Like I felt worthless because my worth was built into my job, my title, my career, what I've done. I was a firefighter, paramedic. I was a real estate broker. I wrestled alligators professionally. I was in venture capital and private equity, worked with family offices and, investment banking and, fill in the blank of whatever things, titles I've had. But I was standing on a bridge and I was so like desperate for identity. And I think God told me, He said, you figure that piece out, you're going to help a lot of people. So I stepped off the bridge with a glimpse of purpose. And my purpose was to try to figure out who I was. So I think if we're trying to figure out who we are, here comes a belief system. If we're trying to figure out who we are, we could go back to the one who created us. Okay. So I went to where I believe creation came from. And I went to God and I went to the Bible and I said, "Why did you create me? I didn't ask to be created. Why did you create me?" And in the Bible, it talks about He knew me before I even existed. He did things for me before I even drew a breath. he wove me together. It talks about him weaving us together, like him knitting us, like him taking special attention and time, the details to build me in my mother's womb with the help of my father, right? But this isn't a sex ed talk, but like he wove us together and he said, I'm going to make Josh special in a way. He's going to be good at this. He's going to have these skill sets. He's going to love people. He's going to be a great encourager. He's going to be good at connecting the dots and connecting people, vision and strategy. Oh, man. And he was excited when he was making it. He counted the hairs on my head and he just knew everything about me. He also said, whoa, Josh is really going to struggle when it comes to these things, details, organization, project management. And I could make a list of all my weaknesses 1,000 feet long, right? But when he wove me together, he's like, you're unique. And he made me in his image. And he goes, when Josh figures out part of Josh's life is to learn who God is, but part of Josh's life is to learn who he is. When he discovers his personal value proposition, when he discovers his superpower, when he discovers what makes him tick, when he discovers the, like you shared, the puzzle pieces of his life, he's going to come alive. It's going to bring him joy. It's going to produce fruit. It's going to help others. He's going to feel a life of purpose and joy and passion. It's going to ignite him. And many people don't go through that journey. I went through it not willingly, but just through brute force and through failure. But like when we do, here's a saying that I try to remember how I say it. Sometimes it doesn't come out well. When we do that which we are created for, we do it in the glory of God and it brings him joy. So a father created us, and when we do those things to his glory and we do those things well, it brings him glory because we do it in his name. But it also produces fruit in my life, in my clients' lives, or my investors' lives, or my friends' lives. So it's just like our the two most important days in someone's life. It's when they're born and when they discover why they were born.
Mm.
Right? So like what makes me tick is learning more about who my God is and then learning more about how he created me and God, how should I use this to pay the bills? How can I use this to help the clients I'm working on? How can I use what you've given me? And sometimes it's really frustrating. Like a few days ago, where I reached out to a friend and go, I'm I'm ready to throw a brick through a window. Like I'm struggling now and I need help. So um, that's my belief. My belief is that there's a guy named Jesus who was God who came down to be with us. He died on the cross, and through his blood, through his sacrifice, through his work, he cleansed our sins if we believe in him. And because of the work that he did, not the work that I did, I'm not anything special, that I can be with him forever in heaven. So I'm thankful for that because I don't deserve it. I didn't earn it. And
Mm.
so that's my belief system in who God is and how I was created. And on the journey I'm in, I'm trying to figure out more about who He is and who He built me to be.
I thank you for that. That's probably one of the most articulated. I see you're strong in your faith, but you're also strong in your conviction. And I have to say, we do share one more thing in common because I do agree with everything you've said in terms of the self-discovery, self-awareness. I do think when people struggling with why are we here, if we are not asking these questions that we are asking them, like what makes me tick, and I'm grateful that you use it. But that was my aha moment, like my own self journey of discovery. Is I need to stay aligned with what makes me tick to go through life feeling fulfilled. And
Absolutely.
even in the craziness of a crazy work day, then I have a 40-minute chat with you like this today, and I go on and I have a way better day because I'm in a more alignment with God, with me, with what it makes me tick. That if I didn't have these 40 minutes, and so I think that that is such an important work that I think you're encouraging people to do into discover your why you're here, and also Lane. I do believe too that Jesus laid off. Believe it or not, people even that disagree that he existed, they know he was a prophet. He laid out a blueprint of following a path that can get you to, a higher awareness into our humanity. that I'm very grateful for. And everything you described, really, it's incredible. So I thank you for that. And I had one priest. I had a priest on the show. I had rabbis. I had people from different. I love. I'm a big Buddhist fan too, in terms of the essence. But I'm a Catholic. I'm a believer in Jesus. So it makes me great joy to see how you explain. And you said what makes you tick. So usually my last two questions are that one, which is the last, and I'm going to leave you to more I'm going to give you a bonus answer to that. But also, Josh, are you working on anything that we have? I know you work on a lot of things, and I like to ask questions that are also relevant to my guest.
Sure.
So, is there anything that you wish to highlight to the audience? I'm going to have your podcast on my show notes. Definitely an invitation to follow you on LinkedIn because you're an encourager. You want to be on other people's
Yeah.
radar. Anything else you wish to share?
Um, Yeah, I think that there's someone in your audience who's really struggling right now. Maybe they just lost a job, or maybe they're going through a transition in their life, and they're going like they have that same question that I had when I was thinking of jumping off a bridge. Is like that, who am I question? What value do I bring? Where should I show up in the world? And my encouragement to you is don't jump, right? Everybody has something special inside. You've got, a lot of puzzle pieces in your background that put them together and start to build a good picture of where maybe your fit is in the business world or the workplace world. It's never too late. It's never, it's never it's never over. Like you don't have to anybody out there have to quit. You don't have to jump, right? So like I just really want to encourage that person who might be where I was. And in the process of that self-discovery, man, I really asked the question like, what brings you joy in the workplace? Like what kind of things do you enjoy doing in the business world? And some people are really creative and they want to create, and some people are very organized and they want to organize, or very, so I would ask like, if you're trying to find your fit, where do you actually find joy? What are you good at? It's called the groundhog principle. It was in a book called, it's coming to memory, it's a book called Good to Great. It's like, what are you really good at? What does the world really need? And what is a financial driver? And you put that together and they call it the groundhog principle. But that's a really good way of discovering like what kind of work you should be doing, what kind of groups you should be doing it with. So I just want to encourage people with that.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. And so, where do you find joy besides everything else you have shared with us? What other things you do? You're obviously a family man, but what can you share? Where did Josh
Yeah,
have fun?
it's a good question because I was writing about it said the other day, where do I find my joy, man? I find a lot of joy in the ideas, the vision, the strategy of what things could be. I like taking a look at big problems and figuring out how can we solve that. And a lot of times it's, I don't have the answer, but I know someone who does. Having a big network gives you that vantage point. And then, what groups need to be participating. I start like putting the puzzle together on like what capital partners should be a part of this, maybe strategically, or what group might buy this one day, or what group might be, a good customer for them. So like, I love vision, strategy, business development, and growth. Like it's just, it, it's, I'm not a, I failed many, many, many times trying to build my own stuff. I'm much better at helping someone put the pieces together to build their own thing. And I find great
Mm-hmm.
joy in that. I didn't find great joy in being a founder. I wound up putting myself in the hospital through stress. Like I had ulcers and like I almost like wiped out that way. So like I just find great joy in lifting and building up others and providing the right resources and the right people, the right connections, the right maybe capital or whatever, like to people to build their visions to solve problems that I'm passionate about.
Well, I'm not surprised you're doing so good. And it has to, somebody said to me on a podcast, it was, suffering is cleansing and is the only way to get to the next step. And I'm a big believer that when we hear the big suffering that people go through and we ask why, God, and we see unfathomable tests and trials that we all go through, we have to realize that that's the only thing that makes us the better version of ourselves, unfortunately. And
Mhm.
it sounds to me like you have taken that suffering, taken that challenge, and just repurposing into even more success. So I thank you, Josh, for saying yes to Back to Basics and for sharing, such great journey with us.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Follow Josh podcast, and until the next episode of Back to Basics. Thank you. You've been listening to Back to Basics. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. If you haven't yet, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on Apple Podcast or any of your favorite streaming platforms. This is the best gift you can give us. Join me next week for another Back to Basics conversation. And if you want to find out about other exciting things I'm working on, visit leticialatino.com. Thank you, and until the next time.